Hello and welcome along to the Property Academy podcast by Owners Partners. I'm your host, Ed McKnight.
I'm Andrew Nicol.
And today's on the show, we're talking about a TradeMe teardown. Don't buy these properties. Yes, that was a pause for dramatic effect. So about a week ago, we did another TradeMe teardown where we went through real-life TradeMe listings to look at why properties weren't renting. Today, we're going to do something similar. We are going to go through TradeMe listings, specifically looking at new build properties that are available for sale at the moment. And we're going to talk about which ones you definitely should not buy. Because if you go on TradeMe at the moment, there are an enormous number of new build properties available. So currently there are over 6,000 new build properties available on TradeMe. And the question is, well, which one do I buy as an investment? Now, of course, the investors we work with here at Opus Partners don't actually go through TradeMe. We find those properties for them. But if you at home are sitting there thinking, I'll just pop through TradeMe, how can we help you find which ones to look at and which ones to steer well clear of? Now, Andrew, we've been looking at some properties and walk us through, what do we think about this one? Describe it for us.
So let's talk about the first one, which is a Fletcher's Living, 2-bedroom with 1 bathroom and a car park in Central City. This is an awesome location. This is in Cashel Street.
Christchurch, right? We didn't say that.
Christchurch, sorry. So really nice 2-bedroom unit. Good location, nice build, but very, very expensive.
So what are we talking in terms of price?
So purchase price for that is $749. It's probably about 100 grand more than what I'd like to see if I were buying this personally.
And what's that based on? Why do you think it's 100K above what you'd expect?
Well, that's just from comparable. So the kind of things that we'd negotiate at the moment would be kind of closer to the 650 absolute maximum for that type of property. Now, this is in a better location than some of the things that we might recommend as investments, but really, when you're thinking about this with your investor lens on, you need to be thinking of what kind of return am I going to get from that? I can't see it getting any more than $600 a week rent. And so the cost to hold on to that property as an investor is quite high.
I think the interesting thing is, while the location is great, I mean, it's like a 2-second walk from the main city in Christchurch. That's why you're paying $750, or is what they're looking to charge for it. While it is undoubtedly a great location, the trouble is that it is really expensive compared to some other properties that we might see on the market. We'll run the numbers on this in a moment. We also recently found this property, right, Andrew? What are we looking at here?
So this was another inner city option. This was a Mike Greer build. These are 2-bedroom townhouses with a garage. So it has got the advantage of having a garage and being in the CBD. You don't see a lot of builds with garages, or not at an affordable rate. Not to say that this is overly affordable.
Because
the purchase price is $869,000.
It's a lot of money, isn't it? It's a lot of money for Christchurch.
What's the median price for Christchurch now?
Do you know what? I couldn't even tell you off the top of my head.
I can tell you this. For $869,000, whilst you won't be in the CBD, you can get a house and land package, like at your own piece of dirt, your own decent-sized house, a couple of hundred squares. You get a lot of bang for buck.
Yeah, and even though it's Central City, it's not right in the middle of the city like the Fletchers. This one's really expensive, actually. So what I want to do now is let's run the numbers.
Let's do the Manchester one. That would be interesting.
So we're going to talk about the Mike Greer property. And this is based in Christchurch in the middle of the centre.
Now, this isn't to say that we don't recommend Mike Greer as a developer. He's an excellent developer.
I thought he was on our naughty developer list.
No, Mike Greer. Oh, you're just joking.
Joke. I'm just joking for you. But I think this is a really good example of where you can have a good quality developer, but not necessarily pricing things that's going to be attractive as an investment. So what do you reckon this would rent for, Andrew?
I reckon you wouldn't get much more than $650 absolute maximum. You were looking for a rental property in the city CBD recently. What?
Yes, until the girlfriend decided she wanted to move to Auckland instead.
They can't make their mind up.
Never. And we were looking at places. And did you know you can get a 3-bedroom townhouse in Central Christchurch for under $600?
Really?
So this being,
maybe I'm being a bit rich at $650.
I'd probably say $625. Yeah. Like, they're nice properties, but are people really going to pay that?
Is there a body corporate on that one? Just quickly jump into it.
I haven't seen the details. I've been looking at the flyer for Mike Greer. Let me zoom in on that.
You're making me squint for anyone watching this on YouTube.
Doesn't say. What I think we should do is let's just keep keep all of the other assumptions other than rent and purchase price the same.
You'd need to have those rates higher.
What would you put it
value
at?
Property, that should be probably 3,200. Cross Street you should use, which you're using as a comparable product, use as 2,700. Insurance would be 1,700 for Cross Street. And I think 1,800 is probably right there. Yep, everything else the same.
So one thing I didn't mention for you guys listening on the podcast is that as well as running the numbers on this Mike Greer property, I'm also running some numbers on a property called Cross Street. Now, I recently did a whole review of that property on YouTube and ended up putting that specific property under contract. I'll talk more about that at the end of this video. So let's do the comparison between the two to see which has the better return on investment. What are you taking away from this,
Okay,
Andrew?
as far as ROI goes, Cross Street's got an ROI of 260% compared to the Mike Greer property of closer to 225%. So there is a big difference there. Probably the biggest thing that stands out, Cross Street has a contribution of $119 a week for 9 years, which is pretty manageable, whereas the Mike Greer property's got an average of $205 for 11 years. So a higher payment for a longer period of time. If an investor bought this property, that is probably going to slow them down from buying the next property. You could essentially almost own two of the Cross Street properties.
Now, what that means is, of course, at the moment, while interest rates are really high, the amount of rent coming in is not covering all of the costs, rates, maintenance, insurance, plus that mortgage as well. And that's why, as an investor, you're having to top up that property, put your own money in there to cover all of the cash flow. And over a 15-year period, it's actually pretty significant. The Cross Street property that I put under contract would end up requiring about $70,000 less money, i.e. less you putting money into that property compared to the Mike Greer homes. You'd have to put in an extra, $73,000 over a 15-year period in order to keep that property. And if we look at the cash flow between them, I'm sure we'll see that it's pretty stark, especially as we get to the higher levels of interest rates. So you can see in the worst year, the Mike Greer property requires you to put $30,000 into that property in a single year. The Cross Street property, even in the worst year, we're talking about less than $20,000.
And I think if you're spending that sort of money, $869,000, you need to be buying in Auckland personally, right now.
Okay, so let's leave that there and instead let's look at
about Auckland.
Let's look at some properties on TradeMe in Auckland. Now, some people are going to be surprised because we've got a property here that we're looking at from a company called Wolfbrook, which we recently did a seminar with, Andrew. And so people were saying, well, why are you featuring them on a podcast about properties you're not recommending?
Now, this is actually more, so we do work with Wolfbrook, and actually, to be fair, I am currently looking at these properties and negotiating these with Wolfbrook. But I think the key thing we want to point out here, and this actually came up with an investor that one of my property partners was working with at the weekend. He flicked me an email and said, can you have a look at these for this investor? He's seen these on the internet. They seem like a good deal. And I thought, well, they do seem like a good deal. So I emailed James and Steve, the owners of Wolfbrook, and then I got the details. Now, $649,000 does not actually buy you a townhouse with parking.
And something that I should just point out for the podcast listeners is that the headline for these properties is townhouses with parking under construction, inquiries over $649,000. Now, if you thought 2-bed, 1-bath in Margaret, Auckland, 649, you'd say, oh, that's actually a pretty good deal. But here's the thing, if you go on their website, only the properties without a car park are 649. If you want the car park, which would always recommend, then you're going to have to pay an extra $100,000.
Which is a lot of money for a car park.
I mean, to me, this is false advertising because actually you've advertised it as townhouses with parking inquiries over 649, but actually the townhouses with parking I mean, yes, the inquiry is well over 649.
Yeah, it is over it.
But I think that's clearly false advertising in my view. So I think that's something we just want to point out, that if you are on TradeMe, sometimes you see something that seems like a really good deal, then you dig into it and you think, well, that's actually not that great of a deal.
And I'm seeing this so often with most developers now. So if they're advertising something online, it will say inquiries from, or starting from, and it will be a really low price. Now, they will be doing one unit at a low price, and it will be the worst unit in the block. It'll have no parking. It might be just a studio unit, and they'll be advertising at the lowest possible price, but then there'll be a massive jump to what the actual product that they're selling is.
I remember a developer in Christchurch, and people could probably guess who it is, advertising from like 350K, and it was a studio unit. And you look at it and you think, that's great. And then you realise that any property that you actually wanted is actually starting from $300,000 more than that. Or you think, that's great, I want the 350K property, but it was sold 5 weeks ago and I'm still using it to sell these other properties. And that's just kind of because it is a quieter market. Let's look at some other properties as well, though, Andrew. We've been looking at this one in Waitakere City in Westgate.
Westgate. Okay, so this one's in Free Taylor Drive. Now, the interesting thing about this, so your asking price is $1.059 million. So you're definitely at the thicker end of what I would consider a good investment value in Auckland. Now, I'd probably say that's an okay price if you're buying in a really premium location. Not that Westgate's a bad location. In fact, I'm settling on a property in Westgate just tomorrow. But for that price point, I just don't think that makes a sound investment decision. The floor plan looks great. The properties look great. They don't necessarily stack up from an investor's numbers. What was the specs on the property? I think it was a 2-bed or 3-bed?
3-bed.
3-bed.
3-bed, 2-bath. But surely, Andrew, this is right next to Costco. Surely that's going to add a bit of value.
I don't know what your obsession with Costco is. Is this an economist thing? You and Tony Alexander saving your beans at Costco. So, yeah, I think, again, you've got good location. I haven't dug into who the developer is. Does it say there who the developer is?
It is by West Green.
West Green. So I don't know much about them off the top of my head. But I do think, you want your properties, if they're for investment purpose, to be right in the middle of that bell curve. You want them to be affordable for the bulk of people when you purchase them and affordable when you rent them. I think that's at the higher end. Now, there are properties that we'd recommend at that price or near there, but in nicer locations.
So let's run the numbers on it to actually see if this stacks up. So this is out in Westgate, and this is, did I say 1059?
Yep.
And usual cost. Now, what do you think this would rent for? 3-bed in Westgate.
I'm going to go, it's probably 750.
About 750, okay. And what's the rates on that going to be?
2,600. Insurance will be 1,600. That'll be fine.
Cool. And let's compare this against another property as well.
I've got one for you. Hang on. This is one that a property pack just came out on that I was just looking at before. This is Mount Roskill, which is in Freeland Ave, 23 Freeland Ave.
Okay.
Purchase price is $895.
Oh, that's quite a good price. What is it? What is it?
It's a 3-bedroom.
3-bed for $895.
Yep, 1.5 to 2 bath with a car park.
What's it going to rent for?
The rent is $750 a week.
Yeah, okay.
Rates, I'd use all the same for that.
Okay, and then let's see how they compare. I'm actually quite impressed by that price.
Thank you. Some good negotiating.
Oh, did you negotiate it? I'm very unimpressed by that price. Go get a better deal.
Now, one thing to remember, that is Westgate's complete, so you need to change that in the ROI calculator, so you'll need to start making contributions now. So, okay, so now if we're looking at Mount Roskill, the return on investment percentage is 372%, which is a very good return on investment. West Green is 280%. So that's more of a number that I'd expect outside of Auckland. Contributions $300 a week on average for 10 years for West Green. Only $168 for 8 years for Mount Roskill. So again, you can almost have two for the price of one of the.
I think the key thing there as well is the total cash flow that you've got to put in this. So with your Mount Roskill, same situation as before. Rent doesn't cover all of the costs, and so you've got to put some money in yourself. Now, over 15 years for Mount Roskill, you're looking at 77 grand. For the West Green property out of Westgate, it's about an extra $100,000 that you're going to have to put in to hold that property, an extra 100K. And over a 15-year period, that really, really adds up. So if we compare the cash flows between the Roskill and the West Green, in the worst year, we're looking at putting in $40,000 worth of cash flow.
$42,000.
Compared to about $15,000 less than that on the Mount Roskill property. And I'd probably say, because Mount Roskill is close to the city centre, the Westgate, to me, that would be a more desirable location. So I guess the key thing, what are we trying to get across here? That when you're looking through properties on TradeMe, sometimes you can see things can appear like they're a really good deal, but you might need to dig into the details to make sure that it really is. As we saw with that Wolfbrook property, where it appeared that you'd get a property with a car park, but actually, no, if you want the car park, it's going to cost you an extra $100,000. Thank you very much. And for some other properties, you might see them being really well designed, but the rent doesn't stack up compared to the purchase price. And that's the key thing. When you're investing in property, you can't just say, oh, well, these nice guys on the podcast told me that I needed to invest in new builds, so I'm going to go look at some new builds. You've got to also make sure that the numbers stack up from a purchase price and a rental standpoint. That's the really key message to take away.
And I think that sometimes new investors or people that are being driven by their emotion can often be swayed by something that looks nice. Looking nice is nice to have. It's not something you should be considering when you're making an investment decision. And I've heard some developers at the moment say, yeah, but our properties look nicer they're prettier than the other developers. Yeah, well, that doesn't make any difference when it comes to investment.
Right, let's wrap it up there. But please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Really does help us get the message out to more people. And if you want to look at new build properties that make sense as investments, then you might like to come in for a portfolio planning session. Remember, this is free. Easy way to sign up for that with our team. Just go to our website, opuspartners.co.nz, click the big orange button that says Get Started, and you'll be away laughing. Thanks for listening to the Property Academy podcast. I'm your host, Ted McKnight. We're going to be back again tomorrow with even more daily strategies, tactics, and insights to help you get the most out of the property market. Until next time.